Hello, welcome to Poetry Unslammed as part of the Empathy Day Festival. I'm Carl Nova, author of Rhythm and Poetry and The Curious Case of Carl Nova.
And I'm Jion Sheibani, author of The Silver Chain.
I'm Paul Jenkins. I'm the author of Bigger Than the Bullies.
Coral Rumble, and I'm author of books like this, Riding a Lion, which is a poetry collection, Little Light, which is a verse novel, and Jakobsotter, which is a regular prose novel. And we are here today to share a very special poetry event with you.
Now, as poets, we are sometimes invited or we take part in something called poetry slams.
These are competitions to find the best poets and see the best performances at a live event.
Sometimes the audience decides who is the best, and sometimes it's a panel of judges.
But today we are going to do something different. Instead of competing with one another, we are going to listen to each other.
It is exciting stuff. But of course, first, I would love to find out a little bit about some of your books. Karl, why don't you tell us all about one of the brilliant books you've written?
I am a hip hop artist, performance poet, as well as an author. So I blend writing music, performing poetry, and writing books all together. And if you jump a bit into my story, I can actually talk about this book of mine called The Curious Case of Carl Nova. And I don't know, I felt like I owed it to a younger me to tell his very interesting story. You've not really heard a story like mine, but I'm not going to go into it now. But it's autobiographical, told with poetry mixed with a bit of prose. And it's told in chronological order from birth all the way up till the pandemic, even. And yeah, this is The Curious Case of Carl Nova. Find out about me.
Yeah, that is Carl Nova. You see what you get, and it's all good. It's all good. So I am Coral Rumble, and most people know me for writing poems. A verse novel like this, like Little Light, I'm going to be reading from. It's about a girl called Ava, and her story is told by lots of slices of what happens. And sometimes poems are like that, they're like a slice of a whole bigger story. But when you put all those slices together, they tell you the whole thing. And Ava in this book, she's not me, but she's got has an experience that is like mine, in that she is homeless. And I had a few years as a child when I was homeless. We had somewhere to live, but it wasn't our own home. Ava is in a hotel because she's waiting to be rehoused with her twin brothers and her mum. And it's really tough. So it follows her story through that particular time in her life.
And it is a really powerful story. Ava's story sort of stays with you, Coral. It's a brilliant tale. I'm Paul. As I said, I'm the author of Bigger Than the Bullies. Now this is my first verse novel, in fact, and it tells the story of a young lad called Harry. Now Harry is quite literally bigger than the bullies. He's bigger than everybody in school. He is Somebody has to be the biggest kid in school, and he is the biggest kid in school. Unfortunately, that makes him the target for a certain group of people in his class. And he has a really tough time at the beginning of this book dealing with that. He's got all sorts of things going on at home, he's got all sorts of things going on with his family. It's not until he finds somebody else at school that's a little bit like him and shares a little bit of his interest in comics and art and drawing, and he suddenly finds somebody that he can really relate to. And yeah, this is his tale of how he kind of overcomes that. The reason that I wrote this book in the first place is during lockdown. I'm a runner, is one of the things I like to do. And I put on a huge amount of weight during the lockdown, and it became really difficult. I found myself heavy. I found myself depressed by it. And I thought, you know what, I'm feeling like this, and I'm, a grown man. What must it be like if you are somebody who is dealing with all these things and all of the stuff that school gives you as well? So I thought I'd start exploring Harry's story, and that's where the book came from. Love to find out about yours, Jion.
Thanks, Paul. I can't wait to read that. It sounds beautiful. So my name is Jion Sheibani, and I'm an author and illustrator. And my book is called The Silver Chain. It's a verse novel, and it's about 16-year-old Azadeh, who's a teenager going through the regular teenage things. She's at a posh private school, trying her best to fit in. She's on a music scholarship, and she desperately wants to become a violinist. But then her mum suffers from a nervous breakdown, and Azadeh's world starts to spiral. Her relationship with her dad, her friends, and even her music. And I really wanted to write a book that was a testament to the power of music and the power of poetry and art to help us through really difficult times.
So we've come together for two reasons today.
First, to take one of the empathy challenges, empathy reflections, which encourages us to listen just that little bit more.
And second, through doing this, to encourage everyone to be empathy activists. That just means to put empathy into action so that life is a bit easier for everyone.
Now, listening is one of those skills we can practice every day with our friends, our teachers, at home with our families, people on our street, our communities. It's something we can do with anybody in the whole world.
So if you look on the screen, you'll see there are 5 key things which Empathy Lab have found are the essential things to do when you're being a great listener. These are
listening with 100% of your attention, really concentrating on the words that are being said.
Waiting until the speaker has finished before taking your turn.
Checking that you've understood what they've been saying.
Asking some great questions that will help you understand exactly what they mean by the words they've been using.
And finally, holding back on giving advice if it isn't asked for, something we all seem to find really tricky.
So that's what we're going to be doing, using those skills as we listen to each other's stories. Coral, do you want to kick us off? Which poem have you chosen to share today?
I've borrowed my own experience to write this. When I was homeless, we were living at my grandparents' house for nearly 3 years in one double bedroom. So there was myself and my brother and my mum and dad, and it was really, really cramped. And it was really hard to look after stuff. And in Ava's story, because she's living in a hotel with her mum and 2 baby brothers, there's no room there either. And they have their crockery in the hotel room all stacked up. Now, in my case, my mum, we had just been rehoused, and my mum had this cabinet with a glass front and all of her wedding gifts in it. And one day it toppled over and everything got smashed. And I remembered kneeling with her, and I knew she was crying about more than just the broken crockery. I knew she was crying about how things were not going very well for us as a family. And so I've sort of given this experience to Ava as well. And so she's in a similar position. Picking up the pieces. Mum on her knees, picking up broken cups. Handles without bodies, bodies without handles, nothing fitting together. I kneel with her, picking up the pieces, avoiding the cuts, careful with the pain. Tears drop between shards. I tell her, never mind, picking up on her thoughts, in the space without shouting, in the space I call room, filled with sighs and silence.
I love that, Coral. It was so moving. I just loved how quiet the poem is and how there's so much in each line. I love the handles without bodies, bodies without handles. I loved the sounds in the poem as well. Cuts, careful, tears drop. Really very moving.
It was almost like you were in the room in this really tiny moment that is actually massive. That was what I got from it.
I just love the way you can feel the emotion in each line. It's not a very easy thing to communicate with just few words, but I was there with each line till the end. So that's beautiful. Wow.
Yeah, it makes you want to read it and reread it,
Right, right.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
Karl, I would really love to hear something from you. Can you choose something and read it for us?
So I'm going to be sharing a poem from this book, The Curious Case of Karl Nova, just to help with some context. So when I was born in good old North London. Yay. North of the river. Let's go. Arsenal for life. Anyway, my mother did a very strange thing when I was born. She took me, when I was not even a year old, out of London to live with this lovely old English lady in a really small town called Haverhill in Suffolk. And later on, I found out this was a thing called farming, crudely called farming, where a lot of West African parents in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even 2000s would take their kids and put them in some kind of pseudo foster care system. But I didn't know. I was just a kid. And this is a poem called Human Torch because I started school in Haverhill. Shout out to Burton End Primary School. And at first, I didn't know I was black, okay? I didn't look at myself like that until I got to year three and I started getting bullied. And basically, this is called the Human Torch. This is what happened afterwards. So it goes, I didn't think I was different. I was a child like everyone else. But one day my features and my skin were ridiculed, and pain is what I felt. I went home and told my nan about the bullies that cursed me. She said, sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt me. But she was wrong, and for so long, daily they would taunt me, and a fire inside would build as their words did haunt me. One day on the playground, by them I was surrounded. Their words like sticks and stones on my eardrums pounded. I couldn't take it anymore. The flames in me scorched. I erupted with anger and became a human torch. I chased them down one by one and gave them all a beating. I know I've talked about no beef before, but right then I was eating. In the head of in the head teacher's office, I was treated like I was the problem. I knew then what I still know now. I had to do something to stop them. Violence isn't the answer, but neither is blaming the victim. Don't treat anyone as lesser just because they're different.
Such powerful words, Karl. And
Brilliant.
when you were writing that, I don't know, because the book takes you all the way through your kind of, like you said, right up to the pandemic from when you were tiny, and that moment I don't know, I felt that when you said about it's really hard when somebody says violence isn't the answer. It's really hard when it's in there, isn't it? And that's, I could feel your frustration. You know what? I'm trying to be the good guy here, but and yeah, and that I mean, I love the fact that you use that Human Torch. Is that a comic book thing as well? Becoming like,
Yes,
you know?
I'm a big Marvel fan, and the Human Torch is part of the Fantastic Four, Johnny Storm. So that was what I had in my head when I was writing it. I had to become my own hero in
Yeah.
that time, and it worked. I'm not saying violence is the answer, but but it worked. They didn't say anything or touch me again.
Yeah, it's and yeah, and but it's the emotion that was there.
Mm.
You know, that was a while back, but the emotion is still there through the words, and it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the rhyme. I love the inner rhyme, the horn and torch, and the idea of the sticks and stones pounding on your ears. It was very, very strong images. And
I want to ask you, Karl. Um, we have this posh word for whether something helps us and heals us called,
Mm.
we say, is it cathartic? And was writing some of this stuff that's gone through so much of your life Did you find it was healing or revealing? What effect did it have on you as a writer, even though you knew you were writing for other people to read?
This is a great question. Now, part of the story is that when I was 7.5, my mother took me out of Haverhill and practically took me to Nigeria and left me on my dad's doorstep for him to raise me. So I held on to so many of my memories from the UK while I was there. I was there for what, 14 years. So that's why it comes across in the writing. Good, bad, and ugly, I held on to those memories of that life because I didn't want to let that go. I didn't want to, because it was a sudden thing. I'm suddenly out of the UK in a whole different place I don't know, in a hostile environment as well, because I had a couple of stepmothers. But read the book. But I was, but going back to put this down on paper was 100% cathartic because I wanted to tell young Karl's story. And in sharing this with other people so far, I found it resonates with a lot of people, both young and old. So it's like it's a common ground for us to all kind of heal together because that's what it does, you know. So Paul, what have you got for us? Please let's hear it.
Yes, Carl, thank you very much. I'm going to read a little bit from Bigger Than the Bullies. And as I mentioned, Harry is the biggest kid in school. He's just had an awful moment in his class where his teacher, who's really not on his side at the beginning of this story, she's witnessed that he's having a real problem with his chair. His chair is actually broken underneath him. And he's had this horrible moment where the whole of the class and then the whole of the lunchroom looking at him, and he's back outside on the playground. And at this point, really the superheroes kind of come to the fore because Harry has a superpower, and that superpower is turning away. If I turn away, I can control it. I'm a big, strong boy, as Grandma says, so there's no use trying to hide. It'd be like trying to smuggle a hippo in with a little litter of chihuahuas. I'm easily identified. If I turn away, then I can switch it all off. I can be in my fantasy world of unlikely heroes. I can do what the other freaks and mutants do. I can triumph over adversity, use my gifts to save my friends and the planet, and other planets too. Turning away brings me stories of hope and valor, of existence without consequence or fuss. I'm part of a team, the army, the band of brothers. I'm finally a part of an us. Turning away is my superpower. My back is like a shield against infinite pairs of firing eyes. My bubble of deflection, a force field, muting the laughter and protecting what's left of my insides. By turning away, I get well over an hour of peace, solitude, relief, and just a tiny bit of brain space. When the bell rings 3 times a day, I'm just a short walk and 180 degrees from safety. There isn't any need for play. It's more than enough for me to make it through. And truly, ask yourself the question, if you were me and you lived the way I do, you were stuck inside this body, wouldn't you?
Well, Paul, that is it's really heartrending to enter Harry's world, isn't it? And to hear his view of what happens to him. I particularly like it when you say the line, infinite pairs of firing eyes. So you've got this attack from people's eyes. And it's really interesting, isn't it? How much someone can destroy us just by the way they look at us. They don't even have to say any words. They look at us and we know exactly what they and I think it's brilliant that that comes into this. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, of course.
this idea that the poem itself turning away, is it a kind of retreat? And is the retreat a defeat?
Well, I mean, one of the reasons I chose the title "Bigger Than the Bullies" is because one of the things Harry never does is he never turns around and confronts the bullying. He finds his own way to deal with it. He works within the school rules. He works within, not reacting, and that often makes him a real victim. But in the end, it also finds his own sense of triumph. So it's a really tricky one to do because it's like Karl was saying. Sometimes the anger inside you is so fierce that you want to deal with it that way, and other times there are other ways of dealing with it. And Harry finds his way through art. Harry finds his way through his own self-expression.
What I loved about it, Paul, is the fact that the more you go into Harry's world, into his fantasy world, the more you feel his pain. It's like the deeper you go in, the louder his pain sounds to me. So when you get to that line, there is never any need for play, I'm not sure I believe him.
Wow. I really, so see, this is so interesting off the back of the poem I just read. It's a similar thing in a way. And the path he chose was to turn away. But I love when the line that goes about triumphing over adversity, there's a line like that. I understand that. I'm right there with the guy, like, yo, leave me alone. So it's that tension of how do you deal with it? How do you deal with it? Everybody might not deal with it the same way, but he chose to turn away. That was his way and turn away to something else. So like you said, art, he had friends. So, I felt that one.
I'm really looking forward to hearing a piece from the Silver Chain, Jion, or finding out which bit you've chosen.
Then I choose a poem that was perhaps close to something I felt growing up, and Silver Chain is in part autobiographical. So this poem is something I think a lot of teenagers can relate to, and it's that moment when you feel really embarrassed by your parents and they're just not getting you. So this is at a point where Azade's mum is starting to show signs of a beginning of a breakdown, and her dad is not reacting in the way that she would like him to react, and he just doesn't get her. So this one is called Lift. The letters on his van are chipped, and he still hasn't fixed that big dent. The inside smells of air freshener, minty trees, and a hint of cigarettes underneath. He stopped smoking in front of me, though I know that he's still hooked. Dad puts on the radio, probably so we don't have to talk, tapping his fingers on the wheel to some 90s pop song, beating like a drummer. It's not bad, in fact, actually kind of catchy, but the chorus begins to get under my skin. So I suddenly change the station to Classic FM without asking him. Dad just tuts under his breath. Arguing is like death to him. And to top it off, it's one of those loud modern pieces that make no sense, so it's making him all tense. As we approach my school, I remind him to drop me off a bit before, on the corner. Here's fine, I say, tugging at the door. He slows obediently, and I tumble out like I'm in an action movie, mumbling, "Bye, you can go now, thanks." And I see him watching those big black tanks gliding ahead through the school gates. And I wonder if he hates them as much as I hate his van.
Wow. I really, really love this. You know what I love the most about this is the detail. Like I could see this happening in my brain. And the first thing I thought was, in the words of Will Smith when he was a young rapper, parents just don't understand. Because if you look at it from the dad's point of view, he's just being a dad. And I don't know whether when you become an adult, you forget when you're an awkward teenager feeling that way about your parents. But she's taking note of everything, the chipped number plate, the smell, so everything is just aggravating the main person in there. Like, no! And then the classic drop me before you get to the school.
Classic. Everyone knows
the
that
way,
line, right?
and the way you describe, she tumbles out of the car like in an action film. So you know that part when the person just jumps out and
Combat
rolls
roll.
like, all right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just love the vivid use of imagery and the detail. I could go there in my mind, and I can remember what it feels like sometimes to look at your parent and be like,
Yeah.
who are you? Who are you? Why are you like this? So yeah, that was really, really good. And I can relate to this. I can relate to this. I can remember being a kid looking at my dad like, no, what are you doing? I'm embarrassed.
Yeah.
So
It's a
yeah, I
painful
love
rite of
that.
passage, isn't it?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. We can all relate to that. Well done. Love that.
Thanks, Karl.
I think if parents are not embarrassing their children, they're not parenting properly. That's what I
Yeah.
think.
So true. So true.
Oh,
I'm learning the hard way right now with my
yeah.
son.
Um, there's a lovely moment in there, Jion, where you say about I switched to classic FM and he tuts, and there's a real and there's that kind of it's almost like the adult child reversal moment. You would expect that the classic FM
Yeah.
would be something that
The
the
dad.
the
Yeah.
adult and all the way through that story, there's your character's dealing with the fact that they're being the grown up in the room when somebody else that should be caring for them is that, and that's just one of those little moments. It's like I'm the one who's dealing with the proper music. You can listen to your pop tunes later, and that's a lovely little. It's just a tiny little hint, but it's a real. It brings the whole relationship together. I felt.
I could talk about this for ages because it is a wonderful piece of writing.
Thank you.
I love how you have filled the silence with your observations. And if you think about it, you sort of think, well, if there's a moment in a story when there's silence, how do you write about the silence? Surely you leave a great big gap on the page. And of course you can't. And what
Yeah.
you have to do is what you did with this is fill it with the observations, the looking around, the noticing things. And everybody feels the tension of the silence as you do that. And
Yes.
I loved it. I loved all of it.
Thank you. Thanks, Karl. It's interesting what you said about silences because I feel like what I find really interesting, especially with verse novels, is the conversations that people do not have. And there's that feeling in this car journey. And I'm sure lots of kids out there can empathize with this of wanting to say certain things or wishing they could have certain conversations and not having them. And it can just be like a couple of words, that indicate this. And I think that those silences, those gaps between the actual conversation you have are just as interesting, if not more so. It's been fantastic to hear all these wonderful stories and words and to jump into your stories.
But now it's your turn.
You need to choose a poem that you would like to share. It may be one of ours. It may be one of yours. It could be by anybody. The important thing is that it speaks to you in here.
Share your poems with each other and try to use those 5 great listening tips we talked about earlier. See if you can really jump into someone else's story and understand the perspective of the person writing the poem.
Teachers, you can now pause the video and come back to us when everyone has shared their poems with their partners.
Hi.
Welcome back.
Hi.
Hello. How did that go? Did thinking about something from someone else's perspective help you to understand them more? Would it make you think about them differently in the future?
Do you think you were being a good listener? If not, if it was a bit tricky, don't worry, you have got days to practice.
As well as empathy reflections, there are 8 more creative empathy challenge activities to try. You can check them out at empathylab.uk.
Teachers, we would love to see any photographs or videos you've got online. So please do tag at Empathy Lab UK on socials, or you can use the hashtag Empathy Day Festival.
So the question is really, whose story will you jump into next?
We've loved taking part in our Poetry Unslammed event with you all today.
And thank you for taking part in the Empathy Day Festival.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.